Longiant is here. Today, we review a Pilsner and discuss a new book about Jordan Peterson.
All right.
Hey, here we are.
Good evening, gentlemen.
3 glasses. How about some beer and conversation?
I think that's a very good idea. What are we drinking?
Well, so I ordered this Bitburger, German Pilsner.
That's pretty good.
All right.
What's on your mind?
Well, you know, I've been struggling for many years to try to figure out Jordan Peterson and his ideas and so forth, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
All right, you've been on his journey.
Yeah.
And we're going to make some sense of it.
Yes, we're going to make some sense of it. But first, let's get into this beer. This is like the prettiest beer that we've had in a little while.
It is just so clear.
It's clear and crisp. Look at that. It's just, you know... Gosh, I mean, that's some engineering there to get that.
That is a clean German Pilsner.
So what's the difference between the German, because a Pilsner comes, you know, it's from Pilsen, Czechoslovakia, and the classic Pilsner is Pilsner Urquell.
Yeah.
So can you remember enough about Pilsner Urquell to make a distinction between that and this?
No, I am getting what I consider some real maltiness.
Now, is a Pilsner fermented cold, or is that a lager that's fermented cold?
Well, a Pilsner is a type of a lager.
Okay.
So you're on the right track there. Yeah, so it is fermented cold. And man, I'm definitely getting the Pilsner flavor here. It's got a good crisp finish. It's got some strong hop flavor to it. It's got a decent maltiness in the backbone. It's pretty good.
Oh, that has some flavor.
Yeah.
And it's light. You can drink that in the summertime.
Yeah. This is quite
4.8.
good. Bitburger, 4.8. According to the German purity law, which is whatever that's however you're supposed to say that.
Right.
And so I think you have to say it in Klingon or something. But yeah. Anyway, Bitburger Premium Pils, very good.
Fantastic. Jordan.
Yeah.
So, Jordan has been on a bit of a journey.
Yeah.
And with regard to... All right, so what's this going to be... For those who don't know Jordan, but before he began his religious journey, he was just a...
He was a Canadian academic, psychologist, scientist, did a bunch of research on different things. And
taught at Harvard.
And taught in Toronto. And he came onto the scene...
Taught psychology.
Yeah, psychology.
Yes.
When the Canadian government said you must speak this particular way.
Yes, it was right when the whole trans pronoun business started.
Yeah.
And yeah, this was
he just drew a line in the sand.
It was very accidental, and he's like, if the individual student wants me to refer them in such a way, I'll be polite and do that.
Right.
But to have the state tell me what words I'm allowed to use, that's he. And and
we find out later that reticence to allow the state to tell you what to speak has a lot to do with the studies that he's done over the years on Nazism and communism and various kinds of tyrannical governments. And basically what he's saying is, no state, you can't tell me what I can say.
Yeah.
That's just not the way it works. So that
brought him
that brought him to prominence, and he became a big deal.
And then he became a public intellectual and touring and
but
rules to life.
But prior to that, he had his 26 series of Genesis. So he was.
Oh no, that was was that before?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Was that before? Because I know he wrote Maps of Meaning before all this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Apparently, Maps of Meaning is incomprehensible.
Yeah, it's super dense.
Now I've listened to the audio about Maps of Meaning, but supposedly it's very, very hard.
It's a lot harder than
than
We Who Wrestle
with God. Yeah, and it's also harder than 12 Rules for Life and More Rules for Life.
But not harder than T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland.
Reference to a previous show.
His 12 Rules for Life was a joy to read. It was easy.
Yeah.
It was written for a different audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for different reasons.
Yes, and found an audience in young men, searching for...
Oh, another thing that brought him to prominence was that interview with that British journalist. Remember that? Where she was trying to get him, and he kept turning the tables on her.
Yeah.
And that really, I think, brought his name to more prominence. That stuff went viral, and people were like, "Who is this woman, and why does she have a job?" Because she was doing such a horrible job interviewing him.
Well, it was 12 Rules for Life became a bestseller. But
but I think that was after he really got his
name.
fame.
But his name helped that. But it was.
Make sure to get in here so we got you.
It would have still been. I mean, it was a good book. It was a popular book. It wasn't just a book that people read because Jordan Peterson had this crusade.
Yeah,
right. It was a good book where it had really practical things to say and help young men who need help.
And then afterwards, he becomes, a lecturer who can, fill
stadiums. That's right.
Nice
so
venues.
we did a show. This was quite a long time ago. We did a show about how maybe Jordan Peterson is like the new Martin Luther, and he's going to bring about a new religion.
Right, because your idea was that he was going to synthesize,
science and religion, and
science and psychology.
Yes. So he was, in some ways, he was following in the footsteps of his mentors, Carl Jung, and some other people who were really trying to find common ground between science and religion.
Right.
And so it seemed as if he was trying to find some way to express religion in a way that was acceptable from a historical, scientific, modern perspective.
Yes, but what I love in the very beginning of this fabulous book here, the reference to Dr. Peterson's conception of God doesn't fit any orthodoxy I'm aware of, although it might be a kind of gateway drug to more traditional religious belief.
Yeah.
And I thought gateway drug is a really good term for the kind of thing that
Yeah, I could tell you my personal story, or the thing that floored me about Jordan. It wasn't all of the stuff that he was doing about free speech and his 12 Rules of Life was nice, but it was, I don't know, it was a YouTube or something where he defines the Bible. Now, I had misgivings to even really approach Christianity, and for various reasons. One of them is the exclusive claims of Christianity, right? Which is sort of tied into what we're going to talk about later. But the notion that he said what the Bible was, and it blew me away. He said the Bible is a book that took hundreds of authors centuries to write because they wanted to pass down what they thought was most important for the next generation to know. And when I read that, I'm like, I saw the Bible in a whole new light. I didn't see it as the Word of God. I didn't see it as a spiritual book. I saw it as something. I didn't see it as a historical book. I saw it. I don't know what I saw it as, but
it's interesting.
So it is a gateway drug.
That is a theme in a lot of what Jordan Peterson talks about. Is this concept of these old stories that have been around for a long time, that have been passed along, like, for example, fairy stories. They've been passed along by moms, right, to their children for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and then finally the Brothers Grimm, go out and interview a bunch of moms and put together these stories. And the concept is that this is like this distilled wisdom that's been collected over a long period of time and reduced down to its essence, and then so now we're getting, the meat of it, and that's similar to his idea, a lot of his ideas about the Bible. Right. When somebody asked him, "Was there really a Cain and Abel?" He's like, "That's not the point."
Right? It's not.
Yeah. So we have watched him wrestle with matters of Christianity and religion over the years, and then he has this tour, which is the same name as a book which was coming out after the tour is over, and it's called We Who Wrestle with God.
That's right, and we went up there.
So we said, let's go. Reading, Pennsylvania was the closest one, and so we go up there, and I tell you, my anticipation is that he has said that religion is valuable, religion is important, religion is passed down wisdom, religion is, and I'm thinking, and he's finally going to tell us, and for reasons X, Y, and Z, it's also true. These things happened. and he did not.
No. And both of us came away very disappointed
in a way,
because
right, but I hate to say this, but I hate to be a Jordan, but what you mean by true at that point is that it was historically true that these events happened.
Well,
because he would say the Bible is true, but it's not true in the way that he wouldn't claim that Jesus rose from the dead 3 days after his crucifixion.
Or he would say that, or actually, what I was looking for, maybe not true, and that's why I am now a practicing church-going member.
Yeah, or something like that.
Some sort of conclusion to this wrestling, not that he was still wrestling.
Yes, and Jordan Peterson is very difficult along those lines. He had a conversation with Richard Dawkins where Richard Dawkins was trying to nail him down and say, okay, look, did Mary have a baby without, sex?
Yes.
And
I mean, I get this. Yeah, I'm kind of with Richard on this.
Yeah, he's trying to nail him down, and Jordan Peterson is evasive and trying not to answer. And at first, it's like very frustrating until you realize that the basic approach of Jordan Peterson is, I don't want the religious enterprise to be judged by such a silly question. He says that the question of whether
if you're going to hinge the purpose and value of religion on whether or not this event actually happened.
Yeah, he's saying that he doesn't want to have any part of that. Yeah. He doesn't want any. He doesn't want to be involved in trying to reduce religion down to this simple question about the historicity of a particular thing. He's saying, was Jesus born of a virgin? That's a way bigger question, like mythologically and symbolically, and in terms of man and woman, and in terms of who's the ideal woman and who's the ideal man, and all these other kinds of things. It has such rich, deep meaning, way beyond the question of, in this particular historical case, did this happen?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what you get out of Jordan Peterson.
Well, then it seems were they just at complete cross purposes?
Oh yes.
And the guys, it was two different worldviews. I mean, Richard even though Richard Dawkins contradicts himself in all his writings, because he is a wonderful, beautiful writer. And he uses illusion and metaphor and myth all throughout his writings, and he does it to create things like memes. I mean, that's crazy.
He coined that term.
Right, he coined that, exactly. And the selfish gene, how can a gene be self? But with all of that, Dawkins is coming at it from a scientific worldview. He put his lab coat on when he was talking to Jordan Peterson, and Jordan's not going to have any of that.
Yeah.
Right, Jordan's like, is God real like this table is real?
Yeah.
Or is God real like thoughts, like love is real?
Yeah.
And, right? So he's just like, are you saying I need to be able to touch it before something is real or true?
And I don't want to rag too bad on the guy who moderated this conversation between Dawkins and Peterson, but I tell you, when I watched it, I wanted to jump through the screen and say, just say this. Would you just ask this question? Because I thought he really didn't get the problem. And the problem is that Jordan Peterson leaps into things. So this kind of gets back to my reaction when we went to Pennsylvania. It's like, what I wanted to hear was the argument. Go through these steps, okay?
Yeah.
I wanted to hear, here's the progression. This, therefore this, therefore this, therefore this, therefore I've come to this conclusion. That's what I wanted to hear, and I didn't hear it. And what happens with Jordan Peterson is he'll be talking to somebody like Richard Dawkins, and they'll be talking about something, and all of a sudden he'll say, that reminds me of this Bible story. And I'm like, Jordan, you idiot.
You're not going to get through to Richard.
You're not going to get through to Richard Dawkins by talking about a Bible story. Why would that even occur to you to do that?
Well, and the thing is Richard Dawkins is always going to win when he's in his platform, when he's in his worldview and scientific methodology. He's always going to win.
Yeah, because he's going to make Jordan sound a little flaky.
But Jordan's always, because I am a little flaky, I would say Jordan always wins when he takes Dawkins out of that. Because he says there's meaning.
Yeah.
There's more meaning in life. There's more reality in life than there is in your scientific conclusions.
The microscope.
So let's talk about dragons for a second, because I think this is a good illustration of what you were just talking about. It's like Dawkins wants to say, come on, are there really dragons?
Right.
And he wants to say, is there a creature that had these, could fly and breathe fire and all?
Right.
And
that's how he goes about the world, right?
And Peterson is saying you're completely missing the point about dragons.
Right.
That our ancestors were small primates that lived in trees, and they had, what did they fear? They feared snakes, they feared eagles, they feared fire, eagles from above, and they feared fire. So if you combine all those fears, what do you get? You get a cat, snake, eagle, fire, right? And what is that? That's a dragon.
Yeah.
So now, then, from Peterson's perspective, that dragon is more real than whether there was ever such a creature has nothing to do with it.
It's more real than making a list of your fears.
Yes.
And so I think of there's a Picasso quote that is art is a lie that leads to the truth. And so that you could say to the writers of the Bible, like, why don't you just spell it out in simple prose instead of telling stories that were supposed to then draw the truth out? Well, because there's more truth comes from the poetry of the story than can be explained in straight up language. And so we'll get into the evolutionary psychology of story.
Okay. So Jordan Peterson wants to say that we see the world through a story. That the way we perceive the world has to be through the concept of a story. And what that has to do with is you get back to the whole question.
This is both art, metaphor, but evolution.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
But science.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, it's right. He's also suggesting. Well, tell me if I'm right. He's suggesting that your perceptions are filtered through basic story.
So that's what you have to start with.
Yeah.
Is like right now when I look out into the world, there's like a zillion facts that are confronting my visual cortex, that are confronting my ears, that are confronting everything. There's so much data. I can't possibly understand it all, right? And the amount of that data that gets transmitted from my eyeballs through my optic nerve into my brain, into my consciousness, you're taking like billions down to millions, down to thousands, down to like 5.
Yeah, exactly. Your skin, the temperature, everything is being filtered.
There's something in your biology that's saying, no, these are the things that are important. And your body, even before it gets to your conscious mind, your body is filtering things out. It's kind of like, you've seen that video where the people are passing a basketball back and forth, right? And they're passing the basketball, and then the gorilla walks in, and most people who watch that video don't see the gorilla.
Because they tell you to count how many times
they're trying to tell you, count how many times the basketball was passed. So you're focused on that, and you don't see the gorilla that walks in and goes, oh! That's an illustration of the way all of our perception is, which is because you have an aim, because you have a purpose, because you're understanding things in the context of a story, you just plain don't see things that aren't that way.
And there are scientific experiments that maybe not definitively conclude that, but really lead you down the path in creating that theory that he's working with.
Yeah, and you don't even need a scientific theory. Everybody's had the experience where you go into the grocery store and you're looking for something, and it's right in front of you, but you can't see it because you were thinking it was a red box and it's a blue box.
I don't trust myself.
They change the packaging.
Yeah, exactly. So, or like in America, salt is sold in cylindrical blue containers, right?
Yep.
If you were in Mexico and salt was sold in a plastic bag, you just plain wouldn't see it because that's not what salt means, right? So anyway, you have this concept of all of our perception, all of our understanding of the world is filtered through story and meaning and purpose and aim. And that's something that he wants to get across to people like Richard Dawkins, is to say, look, you think you're dealing with the raw data of the world. You think you're like just being this objective scientist with a bunch of facts. That's completely not true. You're already, before you even see the fact, before you have anything to do with the fact, you've already filtered it through all these concepts of meaning and purpose
Right. So, but how is it that is the way that we've decided to transfer meaning, valuable information?
Yeah.
Why didn't we just, like when we first started to speak, just say what you mean? Like why did you need to tell the story, and instead of just outlining what a great leader looks like, instead of telling the story of what a great leader looks like?
Yeah, I would say I would say because stories are going to be more true than your outline.
Which doesn't sound actually
so I thought
right, except it is.
Yeah, so I have a couple of different approaches to that. One is, imagine that you have some, intelligent chimp that our ancestors, 750,000 years ago, and they move from place to place based on what's ripe. They eat these fruit, and they go and they eat this, and in one place there's grain, and they take the grain, and the grain is great, and they eat it. But some of them have this idea that there's like this spirit in the woods around here, and you need to leave some grain for the spirit. Okay, so you do that, and then next year when you come back around to that same place, there's a lot more grain there, and they start to get this idea that we're giving grain to the spirit, and it's causing more grain to grow, and this works for us. Okay, well, they completely don't understand what's going on, which is that you're planting seed and causing, right? And it might take...
Or they do understand what's going on, but it's in a different story than the scientific story.
Well, see, I don't think that a chimp understands that if you put a seed in the ground, that a plant's going to grow, right? So that there's some...
But I don't think... Right, but I don't...
At some point, you pass from not understanding that to understanding that. And I think what Jordan Peterson would argue is that a lot of these things are embodied and ritualized before we understand what they mean. So they start to do these things, like leaving grain in certain places, and then they learn what eventually they learn. Oh, if I plant seeds, it's going to grow into this plant.
Or how about something like appropriate behavior? You expressed here in the book about everybody understands what the right behavior is before people had the language to articulate what the right behavior is.
Yeah,
and so that it's at a level. It's at a pre-intellectualizing level
because action happened before intellect.
Yes. Yeah. And that's something apparently you can do with children. Is children will play a game, and they'll be able to follow the rules of the game, but if you were to ask them to articulate what are the rules of the game, they can't do it. Like they can follow the rules, they can act out the rules, but if you ask them what are the rules, they don't really know.
Right, it's like a dog, right?
Or what? Another thing in the book is what constitutes the leader. The qualities of leadership. Are not outlined and voted on.
Right.
I think
exactly.
I think Jim the Gray Wolf should be our boss.
Yeah, I think this is a really important one, because if you imagine a wolf pack, they have all these rules about the way they behave towards one another, like how they fight. Subservience, right? And like who's in charge. And under what conditions do you challenge the leader? And why do you challenge the leader?
Yeah.
All these complicated things are going on. And it's not like a wolf has some, little pocket catechism that he pulls out and understands, this is what you do in this circumstance. He's somehow or other that's built into the circuitry of a wolf. And eventually, at least in the case of humans, eventually we come to understand those things in fits and starts through stories, through rituals, through dances, through whatever.
Right. So in our first articulation of what the great ruler looks like,
yeah,
is not an intellectual. It's going to be a story about this great leader.
Yeah.
Right. It's not going. They're not going to spell out. These are the qualities.
Exactly. It's only later that.
Yeah.
Yes. First, it's going to be a story. Here's the story of when this great leader went and did this great thing, and everybody's going, "Oh, that's wonderful."
I was going to say, but even before the story, it's going to be the action. It's going to be the ritual.
Yes.
And then the ritual comes and it creates the story.
Right.
Because
true. Yes.
when you go to the ritual to the story, that's when you have that gigantic leap from, I would say, total literal understanding or total literal relationship with reality to a mindful relationship.
And there's so many things in your life where you do this. You learn table manners before you understand why you need table manners. Right. You know, that's just the way. There's so many things in life where you do that. You act it out before you understand.
So I think we're making the argument for Jordan Peterson's emphasis on story and archetypes.
Yes.
So now we've got
evolution, how stories are
So
really
now So now you've
basic.
So, exactly. You've got the evolutionary aspect.
Yeah.
Then you've got the sort of the psychological through literature.
Yeah.
And then later on through psychology, what aspects of the importance of these aspects of religion.
Yes. And I think one of the big things about Jordan Peterson that probably confuses a lot of people is he sees the Bible as sort of a condensation of a lot of these things, kind of like this what we were talking about before with like the Brothers Grimm and these stories, Snow White and
you passed on what was important and meaningful and valuable for your kids to know.
Yes.
Yeah.
To allow them to survive. Right?
Yes, exactly.
So cultural evolution.
These things, these stories that were meaningful and important, got condensed and repeated over time, and they end up. You know, the Bible becomes this this reservoir of all these different stories and concepts and archetypes and things that. And he also sometimes will talk about it in the context of like artificial intelligence,
Right.
where this, what you're doing is if you were to take some culture and you were to try to say what is the most fundamental fact of that culture, what is the most fundamental text of that culture, what you might say is, well, what's the one that people talk about the most, refer to the most? You know, it's part of their language.
Yeah, right. So you could have family and honor over here. You could have all you ever talk about is the warrior, the guy who wins the battles,
right? Yeah.
Right. So that would say something about that culture.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
But does the Bible transcend? So that's kind of the difference between myth and folklore, right? The folklore is regional, and the Bible, presumably, isn't just about the Jews in this part of the world, but about mankind, more broadly.
Yeah, and the idea, what Jordan Peterson would argue, is that the Bible is so foundational to Western civilization because it's been referred to so many times, because we use language from the Bible, we have concepts from the Bible, that it's like the foundational text of Western civilization.
Yes.
And that's, I think you could say the Bible and then maybe like Shakespeare, Dante, you know, there are other things you could layer on top of that.
Right.
Yeah.
But
the Bible,
top of the Bible.
I don't think that you could argue with that.
Yeah.
The Bible
so
has to be.
again, we're at JP's, the indispensable value of the Bible, the foundation of Western civilization, which is a great thing and worth preserving.
Yeah.
Are we at the point of that the God that is mentioned exists in the real world.
Right, exactly. And this is the thing this is the thing that's so frustrating about, because he'll say things.
He'll walk right up to it.
Yeah, he'll say things like there's this concept of the logos, and there's this concept of Christ, which a concept he gets from Jung, that the definition of Christ is like the perfect man, and Jesus being the Christ, being the perfect man, and he believes in that concept. But then when you press him, like, well, wait a minute, how about this guy, the smelly guy with sandals who walked around in Palestine? Is that really the guy you're talking about? Did he really die on a cross? Did he really rise from the dead?
Yeah.
That's where he gets squishy.
Because so what I got. So let's just come back to the lecture that we attended.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to be the underlying theme ultimately was sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if the greatest thing that one could do, and you would say, look, every day I sacrifice what I really want to do to go to my stupid job, to bring home the bacon, to provide for my family, and you know what? That's a form of sacrifice and good for you.
Yes.
And then you can work your way up to, somebody jumping in front of a bullet.
Right.
And then you get to the point where somebody dies for the sins of all mankind.
Yeah.
And then that, and the hierarchy of sacrifice gets you up to this figure.
Yes.
But if you're projecting south, or bottom up, you can say, therefore we have projected this figure.
Yeah.
Or the flip side is that figure exists, and we recognize the sacrifice from the most, the greatest sacrifice ever, on down to our puny little sacrifices in our lives.
Yeah, and that's brilliant, because that ties in directly with what C.S. Lewis would say about myth became fact. So one approach to the story of Jesus is to say, well, wait a minute. We've seen the same kind of thing in the Mithras cult. We've seen the same kind of story over and over again. The dying and rising God, the idea of the wise man, all these different themes that you can throw together. And one approach is to say, here are all these different themes, and we can throw them together, and we can say, Jesus is just an expression of all those different themes put together. But another approach to it is to say, well, wait a minute.
Where's that thing come from?
Yeah, those different themes and things are actually reflections of a reality. Right. Where C.S. Lewis would say, okay, yes, here are all these myths, but wait a minute. The gospel is in the such and such year of Augustus, here in this particular place, in this particular time, myth became fact. That these things happened in the real world. And that, I've heard some conversations between Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Pageau about that particular thing, where it sounds like Jordan Peterson is getting close to saying, wait a minute, yes, it really did happen, that all these myths were actually incarnated reality in this particular person in this particular place. But he hasn't been all that straightforward about that.
I think it's idolatry. The idea of a historical Christ. Because at the end of the day, the history is just a story, and you're putting the story above Christ and God.
Well, that's an interesting perspective.
And the idea of a transcendental reality, an idea of universal meaning, and the idea that there was the idea of an objective God doesn't make sense to me, because if God, if you're going to say God is all powerful, all knowing, and everywhere, then He's inside just subjectivity too. Mm-hmm. So and that just blows apart that whole world view. And the thing is like Jordan Peterson, when he talks about the top of the pyramid and the highest aspiration, that's what he's going for. He's talking about two things. And it's both, by the way. I think what you were talking about. He's really talking about the important stories that can orient and get you closer to that top of the pyramid.
Right. And
then he's also saying that there is a top of the pyramid, but I don't know what the hell it is.
But can you get people to go to church in Jordan Peterson's? It's more important. The stories are more important than the actual existence.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it sort of cuts the knees out of religion.
Yeah.
To say, it's not important if God is actually there. What's more important is that the stories are meaningful and powerful. I mean, it may work for Jordan, but I'm not sure if that's going to put...
But Jordan's never said God's not actually there. He's never said that. He's never denied that. He's never...
But he won't take the step.
But he won't take the step because it does... Well, he won't take this step because as you take this step, you are defining God in a certain way, and he's not going to do that because God's undefinable.
And I agree that that's how Jordan works. But if I'm trying to, if we're trying to make Jordan the new Martin Luther, then he's going to have to do better than that.
So what you're saying there, Longinus, reminds me very much of what I was saying before about the conversation with Dawkins about the virgin birth. Is he doesn't want to reduce the meaning and significance of the concept of a virgin birth down to the question of, did Mary have a child, immaculately?
And I would say the easiest way for him to get out of it to say is, I am not going to delimit all this to a specific story that cannot hold the meaning that I know that this story that what we're talking about has.
Yeah. However, you have to give some credence to what Pigweed is saying here. That for a lot of people, the idea of okay, here's this story. Okay, fine, I can tell a story too. If it didn't really happen, then what's like you take the Dawkins of the world.
Because stories orient you, and they orient you either to good or bad, and that fundamentally gets down to the point, is there a moral good and bad?
Yes.
And the idea that there is a good, and the stories that orient you there and helps you sort of ascend to be the best person that you could possibly be.
Right. And
that's what you want.
And I get that, but there's two words you used in there. Is there? And I think a lot of people, when you say "is there," they want some reference, some reality. They want something in the real world that they can say, "Look, here is where it happened." Okay, but that is the kind of tension that you see in a lot of what Jordan Peterson is going through.
And the first verse of the Tao Te Ching talks about that. It talks about the way that can be spoken of is not the constant way. The name that can be named is not the constant name. But rid yourself of desires in order to let it, in order to know its reality. But allow yourself to see its desires in order to see its manifestation. That it's right there at that. Incarnation is the big thing that Christianity should be talking about. Right?
Yeah. Yes. Of course. That's Christmas. I mean, that's So one of the things I tried to do in this book is to take all these different themes from Jordan Peterson and say, okay, when we went to Pennsylvania, and I wanted to say, this is what I wanted to hear. Right? What I wanted to hear was an argument that went from this point to this point to this point to this point and went sequentially through. So what I tried to do is say, okay, if I was Jordan Peterson, this is the argument that I would make.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yes, and I can't wait till he comments on this. He'll be like, yeah, that is kind of what I've been trying to do all this time, and it's done succinctly in 75 pages. But we might have to wait for that. But
I mean, it's great. I mean, your description of why evolution matters. I think that's it makes sense. It provides lots of insight. Your second chapter, perception depends on values. Third, ritual before realization.
To the evolution. a lot of religious people don't want to hear
I know, and I've spoken with them.
They say you know, we came out fully formed, and
And I had a
that's a silly
podcast.
religion.
I had a podcast interview with a friend who he doesn't
Young Earther?
doesn't buy the religion, the evolution stuff. So
right. So you're right. Well, you're trying to sort of bolster the argument with like this is how our brains work in a certain way because of this long evolutionary process.
Yeah.
But in conjunction with the existence of God.
Yeah.
But you have people who they just
don't want any of that.
They don't want any parts of that.
Yes.
But I think you're helping the argument, or you're helping Jordan Peterson's argument anyway.
Yeah, you are.
And Jordan Peterson is. But the thing is that there's something slightly cynical about arguing for the value of religion without talking about the truthiness.
The value of religion without believing in God.
Well, it's you know what it is. You know what it is. It's the Bene Gesserit in Dune. That's precisely what they are.
Yeah.
They manipulate religion. They use religion to manipulate people towards their ends, but they don't believe any of it.
Right. But
which has happened time and time again.
But not but not entirely selfish ends. Like this is the best thing for the culture.
Exactly. They have this goal. They have this goal of the Quisac Satarak, however you say that.
Yeah.
And they want to like do this thing that's great for humanity, and they have this multi-generational plan that they want to get to, and they see religion as a tool to do these things. Right. And from their perspective, they're like doing the greatest thing in the world. But
right.
They're basically just using religion
for selfish means, like for me to maintain power over the universe. I'll convince these people. No, really, this is.
But it's not the highest aspiration on the pyramid. That's the thing too. Is remember, Jordan Peterson is always striving for the highest aspiration on the pyramid, or to get to the next rung of the ladder, which is probably infinite or close to it. Mm-hmm. And when you do things like that, you are using religion to create a goal that there's something better than that, right? Because religion should be about the best of the best of the best. It should be about
the peak, the top of the hierarchy of values.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So can I go ahead?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So can I give kind of a summary?
Yeah, wrap this up.
Yeah. So, all right. So I think first of all, I think what Jordan Peterson is doing is tremendously valuable. Yes. I think it's what's necessary in our culture right now is this kind of a conversation to understand how these things work together, to get past this the sort of childish. I mean, Richard Dawkins is a brilliant man, and I'm sorry to say this, but his perspective on some things is kind of childish, and so we need to get past the way we're thinking about things now, and we need to have a richer, fuller, more mythological, meaningful way to look at it. And for that, I think Jordan Peterson is doing fantastic work, and I love what he's doing. However, I think he's if from the perspective of the Bible, I think he's missing two very big things. One is God in the Jordan Peterson world is a psychological phenomenon. Mm-hmm. God is not an independent actor who does things. Like when God speaks to Moses through the burning bush, it's not God speaking to Moses. It's like Moses realizing something.
Yeah.
You know? And when God speaks to Noah, it's not God speaking to Noah. It's Noah, channeling this concept, right? Exactly. So everything is a psychological phenomenon. God is not a being that does things. And that's number one. Number two is there's a huge theme throughout the Bible of forgiveness. That God is one who is merciful and gracious and forgiving. God is the one who hangs on the cross and turns to the thief next to him and says, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." God didn't send his son into the world to condemn the world, but the world might be saved through him. That is completely lacking. There's none of that in Jordan Peterson. Everything in Jordan
has,
Peterson.
Right, and I absolutely agree with that. But my question to you, because I'm so curious, is: has Jordan Peterson really done a lot on the New Testament?
Yes, he has a gospel seminar, and
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, but the thing is, he doesn't understand the gospel in this at all. Because everything for Jordan Peterson is self-help. It's, stand up straight, hold back your shoulders, be responsible, take all the responsibility you can bear, take up your cross, and that's all good advice. It's all great stuff.
Right.
But he completely misses the bottom line fundamental message of the Bible.
Sometimes
the Bible or the New Testament?
Both. The entire Bible.
Right.
The entire Bible. The message is, you're a sinner and you need God's forgiveness.
Right.
And that's something that
yeah.
he just absolutely does not understand.
I like that.
Wow. Interesting.
That was brilliant. Because you're absolutely right. Christianity is about mercy. It's about forgiveness.
Yes.
That's its superpower. Well, that's wrong with the way to say. I mean, if you look at the different religions out there, that's really where it's important.
Yeah, Christianity without forgiveness isn't Christianity.
Very good. Well, kids, wrestling
and it's
with
only
Jordan
77
Peterson's
pages.
God, you can read it in an afternoon.
And We Who Wrestle with God is 546 pages, and this is 77 pages.
Got it there. All right, gentlemen, good job.
Cheers. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.